Hello, everybody. Welcome to A Survivor's Guide to Hell, the podcast. I'm PJ Aubrey, here to walk you through this pessimist-friendly guide to finding the silver lining. Each week, we pick an unpleasant topic and share stories and information that will hopefully help you laugh, help you find a bright side, or even change your perspective on something. Thank you so much for listening. Today, our unpleasant topic is pests. When it comes to pests, we've got some good news that may just take the creepy out of those crawlers. Stay tuned. Spiders, earwigs, ants, bugs. You spot one skittering across your bedsheets and worry about what happens when you're sleeping. You shed the protection of your clothing for a warm shower, only to find a big one trapped in your tub. And you find them marching in their rings across your living room floor, disappearing under your couch towards whatever disgusting morsel your toddler dropped there the day before. Maybe it's why you haven't thrown away that pest-control flyer yet. It seems that insects and spiders have a special way of creeping us out without even trying. But we're not totally biased against bugs, right? Some of us consider it good luck to hold a ladybug, and we're delighted if a butterfly graces us by perching on our skin. Here's the thing. Have you ever pictured a butterfly without its wings? You should. Turns out butterflies can look every bit as icky as other bugs when you picture them without their iconic flaps of color. How many more insects would we be honored to see fluttering around our yard, if only they flew with delicate sheets of stained glass like their butterfly cousins? What if insects and spiders were cute little polka-dotted dots of rosiness, like a ladybug? What if they had less eyeballs, fangs, and legs? Would we stop going out of our way to squish them? Pardon me if I'm starting to sound like a hippie. I'm not immune to yelping and jerking if I find a creepy bug on my hand. But I'm more of a catch and release kind of girl, because I know there's more to these strange little creatures than meets the eye. Today, we're going to find out what makes bugs so important. We'll learn how a mere name can change the reputation of a lowly, deplorable spider. Just how a pair of beautiful butterfly wings can change a weird-looking bug into an insect celebrity. We'll also learn how insects, spiders, and other crawlers help our gardens to thrive and our earth to stay healthy. We've got a lot of good stuff on pests, and this topic will be our first two-parter. Join us next week to learn more about what insects can do for your home and garden, and examine how these so-called pests are viewed in cultures where the ew factor isn't quite so prevalent. Here's a hint. There's lots of gods and psychoactives involved. Please, don't call pest control just yet. You might be surprised by what's worth saving. Act 1. The Power of Identity. The Spider Story. This next story is brought to you from my agricultural science class, way back in 9th grade. It was one of my favorite classes. Not only did we get to talk about horses, flowers, pigs, and gardens, but there were also a couple cute boys. Two of my closest friends shared the same class with me, and to seal the deal, we got to call it a science credit. The teacher was a pretty pregnant woman with dark, curly hair. I can't remember what she was teaching that day. Maybe something about strawberry DNA or cattle breeds. Either way, someone spotted something on the ceiling. Gross! The student called, directing her finger at a large, dark spot cruising slowly across one of the ceiling panels. It was a spider. "Oh my god," she exclaimed. "It's right over my head! Squish it!" One of the boys, the tallest kid in class, immediately began pulling a desk in position so he could stand on top and do the dirty work. The teacher looked on, half frustrated at the interruption and half amused at the quick action being taken. I, on the other hand, was not amused at all. I'd spotted that spider a while ago and was glad for the distraction. I'd silently decided that this particular arachnid would be my buddy. For him, I would keep his existence a secret and protect him from the squish-thirsty humans below. For me, he would scuttle around and help keep me entertained while we drilled the difference between a Holstein cow and a Hereford cow. I sealed the deal by giving him a name. As the tall kid began to climb on the wiggling desk, I knew my buddy's life was in jeopardy. "Wait," I said, feigning concern. "You'll get hurt." "No, I won't," the boy replied. "But—" I paused, then shrugged off my sheepish feelings and dove into another plea. "I named him Ricky." "Aw, Ricky," one of my friends said. He's got a name now, someone else pitched. You can't kill Ricky. The girl who'd revealed Ricky didn't protest. The spider was still crawling to a different part of the ceiling, and that seemed to be enough for her. The tall kid shrugged. You got lucky, Ricky, he said, climbing back down. The teacher called for our attention, and the excitement was over. I'm not really sure what to make of this story, but I sensed something a little more powerful underneath its quaint little plot. I took something that was disliked, misunderstood. I gave it something my classmates and I already had, a name. It had an identity now, and for that, it was saved.
Lonely spider crawling on the floor. Lonely spider longing for love once more. Oh, is he lost forever? Oh, can he still endeavor?
Act 2. What the bug expert has to say about pests in your garden. Of course, there's much more to so-called pests than the story I just shared. The impact of spiders, beetles, wasps, and more go far beyond my teacher's paneled ceiling. Last year was the first time I truly got my hands dirty with a garden, and was the first time I was intimately concerned with pests. The aphids were devastating my cabbage. I had no idea what to make of the caterpillar on my tomatoes, and the incessant wasps were particularly freaky looking in our family's new city. There were plenty of different pieces of advice that other gardeners were willing to offer regarding the pests, from homemade pesticides to store-bought poison. However, I was particularly intrigued by one theme sprinkled around the gardening community: fight bugs with bugs. The more I read, the more I discovered the surprising truth. Some of the most hated creatures in our gardens are also the best for our gardens. I wanted to know more, so I contacted Zach Shum. He's an arthropod diagnostician at Utah State University, and he knows a thing or two about bugs. What is an arthropod diagnostician?
Yeah, so I'm essentially an entomologist, so I was trained as an entomologist and kind of as a wildlife biologist in general, but a diagnostician. My particular position focuses on identifying insects that really come in from anywhere. So homeowners, green industry, farmers, pest control companies, and things like that. So I work in the Utah Plant Pest Diagnostic Lab, and overall we are just a lab through Utah State University Extension and the biology department here at Utah State University that just diagnoses and provides management recommendations or just advice relating to things that are or pests that are of disease or insect origin. So I focus on diagnosing the insect issues that come into the lab primarily. So I really am just identifying insects all day and providing information to clients.
So people are sending in physical bugs for you to look at and identify and teach them about, basically.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so we accept either photo submissions or we get a lot of samples in the lab too. We can do some lab diagnostic tests where we can do things like extract DNA from insects or plant viruses and things like that. So sometimes you need to look at the DNA to identify things. Other times you can just look at it under a scope or even in a photo in a lot of cases and just be, oh, I know what you're dealing with.
How long have you been doing this?
So I have been in the diagnostic lab for, since August of last year. So I'm coming up on my first full year, but I've been doing insect-related work for a while. So I actually did my undergraduate degree in entomology and also wildlife conservation. I've been identifying insects for a very long time, but officially I've been doing it for less than a year. So I'm still fresh, but
you don't sound fresh. You sound like you know everything.
I appreciate that.
No problem. But you mentioned that you've been wanting to study bugs since you were 8 years old. Is that right?
Yeah, ever since I was, as little as you can imagine, I was just fascinated by insects. But as soon as I knew that you could study it as a profession, that's kind of when I knew that I was going to do it for the rest of my life.
I think that is so cool. Like, a lot of 8-year-olds are torturing insects, and asking for puppies,
Yeah.
but you were studying insects when you were
Yeah,
8.
I think a lot of the like what we call like torturing insects as a kid though comes from a fascination with them. I mean, it really depends on the person, but
Right.
I was always. I mean, you can talk to my parents, and like they would always say I'd be like riding around my tricycle at like 3 years old, and I'd just be stopping to look at every little, microscopic insect on the sidewalk, and I always knew. But it was a weird thing. Like I would tell all my friends like I was into it. I had like an insect collection that my parents helped me form when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and everyone was always just like thinking I was weird because of it. And I was like, no, it's really cool if you just actually pay attention to what's going on around us, because insects kind of run the world. I mean,
Yeah.
you can argue that like soils are more important than like maybe plants, but I mean insects are really, they hold everything together, and without insects humans probably wouldn't exist. At least not nowhere near the capacity that we
Right.
exist, and we need insects to survive, and the ecosystems need insects. And
I think that's great. I mean, really, when I go on Netflix to watch a nature documentary, they're all about jungle tigers and the elephants in Africa, and you don't see a lot about bugs. So
not as much, and I would argue that they're a lot cooler. I mean, also trained as a wildlife biologist, like I love all of it.
right.
But insects, I think, are just they're not as well known, just because I mean there's still like probably hundreds of thousands or millions of insects that we have not described to science, and
Right.
odds are at some point in your life you're going to see many things that might not be described as science, even if it's microscopic and you can't actually like see it. But we probably walk past things in our day-to-day lives that we have never described to science before from an insect perspective, and that's just really cool.
I really appreciated what you said in your email about avoiding turf so you can actually have some biodiversity in your lawn.
Well, a little bit of turf is okay, and I think when it comes to plants that we select, it really comes down to individual values. When I ask homeowners why they love their turf, they say, "Oh, well, my kids can play in it very easily," and they just love that look or that aesthetic, which is totally fine. Like there's nothing wrong with having those values and planting turf grass and things like that. But from an insect and biodiversity perspective, turf is really bad. It doesn't really do a whole lot. And in a place like Utah, like we're the second driest state in the nation, turf grass, in my opinion, is a complete waste of water. And I'm not saying that from the perspective of like you can't have turf grass, but there are plants that you can select that are going to promote biodiversity more than turf grass, and you're going to save more water than turf grass.
Right.
But again, it comes down to individuals' values. Like this, I'm not sharing that as like this is what we recommend as USU Extension, but just coming from a conservation background, I really love pollinator gardens that are drought tolerant plants. We don't have to water them as often, and they're just going to bring biodiversity, insects, birds, mammals in many cases, to your yards. And I think if as a generality, people like animals. But the turf lawn, there's a really good book by one of my former mentors that's called Bringing Nature Home, where he talks about we can really solve a lot of these wildlife-related issues and like biodiversity loss just by having a small pollinator garden in our yards.
Interesting.
Or we can just plant native trees instead of planting really attractive, annual plants or perennials that aren't native to the United States, right?
So, I don't know if you have this all logged in your head, but are there any specific plants for anyone who might be listening that would do well in Utah, that have a good aesthetic, attract the pollinators?
I'm trying to think of some really common ones that are easy to find here. So milk vetch is a really good one. Primrose, chokecherry, sagebrush. There's a wide variety of plants
Things
that
you've heard of.
the list would go on and on. But I'd be happy to supply you with this list if you're interested in it.
I'm excited. Okay, my family just started a garden last year. We were terrible. We were just absolutely the worst gardeners in the world. So we're doing a little better this year, and I've been spending more time on Google figuring out how to manage pests. And of course, there's all the top 3 results in your Google bar are the ads, like all of these pesticides that you can buy to protect your cabbage. But under that, just sprinkled in everyone's gardening blogs, are the beneficial insects, the insects that can keep your plants happy without you using pesticides on your garden. So I want to talk more about those bugs.
Yeah, I mean, there's there's many ways that you can promote beneficial insects. And one thing that I like to always share with homeowners or any client that contacts the lab is many things that we traditionally think of as pests around the house. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the garden.
Right.
Could also be considered beneficial.
Right.
Or really, I would personally consider completely beneficial with a couple of caveats. So, a couple, for example, like the biggest one is spiders. I mean, we get so many spider inquiries in the lab that, people are worried about them being like dangerous and et cetera. And just as like a disclaimer, there are really no really venomous spiders in Utah that are a bad health concern at all.
I can just imagine about 10 people right now going, wait a second, what about the black widows?
You missed by about like a month and a half. I actually have a black widow spider, or had a black widow spider as my desk pet.
That's great.
But they don't live for very long, so unfortunately that she has passed on. But
my condolences.
So black widow spiders, and this is not a recommendation to go out and just like pick up a black widow spider if you find one, because they do have potent venom, and if you get bit, you're going to have a pretty bad day. But they are extremely docile spiders. They do not like to bite. And you can, I pick them up because I'm a trained entomologist. So I used to get them I used to place traps outside for my research as a graduate student. And I would have black widow spiders that would web on them all the time.
That's
I
great.
just like pick them up with my hand and I just place them somewhere else. And they're really not as bad as people think they are. We hear all these like stories of people getting bit and like, but they're really not that bad. Any spider in the garden that you find, especially in Utah, is not really a concern. And they're extremely beneficial because they're running around eating all of those pests. But yeah, save the spiders. Spiders are, there are really no spiders in the area that are going to try to bite you. It doesn't happen.
Okay.
It's funny, so at my house, I keep the spiders inside when I find them because they're natural pest control. I've had one that's been living in my bathroom for probably 2.5 years now.
Really?
Yeah, it just kind of webbed off in the corner, and I just let it there, and you'll see like the insects that make their way into my bathroom, they'll just be in the web, and it's just food for the spider.
So to recap, the spiders in your garden might freak you out, but they're eating the things that are eating your vegetables and your flowers, so on and so forth.
100%. And I guess the main point there is that even if there's spiders in the area and you're kind of working in that area and digging your hands into plants, like the odds of a spider bite are incredibly small. So if you see one that's on your plants, like you probably don't even have to move it.
Forward, backward, no direction bound. Where is home? What is where his love was drowned?
Whew, that was not the end of our conversation. In next week's episode, we'll discuss a few more insects that are blessings in disguise and what you can do to invite them into your lawns and gardens. We'll also figure out if there is still a bug on this earth that can creep Zach out. Spoiler alert, there is, and it ain't pretty. Remember, this is part 1 of our 2-part pest series. Now we invite you to join us for our weekly Silver Liners Challenge, which is designed to be an easy, actionable step you can take to help boost your week and help you survive hell. Here it is, the Silver Liners Challenge. This one's easy peasy. Next time you see a bug, try to be curious about it. Observe it for a few extra seconds than you usually would. Take a moment to wonder what it does for the world. Feel free to share your experiences in the comments of our website, www.survivorsguidetohell.com, or on our Facebook page. This is a podcast version of our sister production, A Survivor's Guide to Hell, the blog. This podcast gives you a way to access our content when you're driving, cleaning house, or saving a spider. But if you'd like to see the videos and pictures that often accompany our posts, like what a butterfly looks like without its wings, check out our website at www.survivorsguidetohell.com, where you'll also find much more information, including our storytelling code of ethics. We're always looking for cool news stories. If you have something to share, please visit our site and drop us a line. And remember, if you liked this episode, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Listen, we're on a budget, and apparently podcasts, websites, and recording equipment aren't free. If you'd like to help out, please visit the support portion of our site and see what you can do to contribute. I promise some good karma coming your way. Last but not least, our cheesy joke of the week. Okay, babe, you're up.
My wife told me to take a spider out instead of killing it. We went out, had a few drinks. Nice guy, wants to be a web designer.
Good work, boo-boo. Everybody, have a great Monday.